Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. My name is Madeleine and this is Made with Books. And I wasn't sure whether I wanted to do today's video. I guess it's a haul video, if you will, and I myself am not a super big fan of those, but I realized I really want to share the books I got in London and Bristol with you, so I'm doing it anyway and hope you enjoy it. I realized the books I'm going to talk about, there are a lot. I mentioned it during Litmus that my boyfriend and I were going to London and we were going to go bookshop crawling, and we used a video by Lauren Wade that she did together with Jean from Bookish Thoughts, where they did a bookshop crawl, and their video helped immensely picking out what bookstores we wanted to go to. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and I will put a link to it down below. And we normally don't buy books this excessively, and so this was just a special occasion. This is like the one big haul you're gonna see, and then that's probably gonna be it for I don't know how long. I just wanted to show those books to you. And I sorted them by the bookshops we went to. So the first one was sort of arbitrary. It was just a shop. We also needed some Christmas gifts still, and it was a shop and they had lots of toys and gift type things as well, and we had gotten all those, and then we came to the cash register and saw Books versus Cigarettes by George Orwell, and we both like George Orwell, and my boyfriend is writing his dissertation on essays, and so he always likes to pick up little essay collections. So this is the first little one we got. And then we went on to Foyles, which is the store where we splurged a bit, and Foyles is huge, the one in London. We didn't make it through all of the bookstore. We could have probably stayed there all day, but yeah, I just thought I get into those books now. And the first one I'm going to mention is one that Daniel picked out, and he picked The Major Works by Robert Browning. And Robert Browning, I think, is most famous for his poetry, and this collects a lot of his poetry, but it also collects his prose work, and it collects letters to Elizabeth Barrett, so this should be interesting. And that is one that we got at Foyles. We also got some other classics. We got Aphra-Behn Orinoco, which is considered to be one of the first English novels. And then we both never have read anything by Elizabeth Gaskell. And I mean, she's an important Victorian author. We picked up the old nurses' stories. These are two Gothic tales combined into this little book. I also had to pick up this one. It's called The Suffragettes. And this has pamphlets and speeches and pictures and everything from the time of the suffragettes. And then I spotted Ice by Anna Kavan, and this sounded really interesting. It's sort of a dystopian future and everything freezes over, and there's this woman running away from a controlling husband into the ice. And then we picked up El Defo by C.C. Bells. This is a graphic novel, and my parents-in-law are actually deaf, so this book sounded really interesting to the both of us. And C.C. Bell is talking about herself growing up, and she became deaf at I think the age of 5, if I remember correctly. I've already read this and really enjoyed it. And she wears a hearing aid though, so she doesn't use sign language. So this was a bit of a different experience than what I know of deaf culture so far. Another one I've already read is Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. And this is a Japanese novel that I absolutely love. It's about, and I should remember her name, Kaiko, and she works in a convenience store, and she is in her mid-30s now, but she still hasn't gotten married and she hasn't built up a career. And the novel never really states this, but I read her as being somewhere on the autistic spectrum, and everybody, her friends, her family, they expect her to do more with her life. We also picked up Salim Haddad, Guapa, and this sounds super interesting. The novel is set in the Middle East, and it's about the LGBT community in the Middle East during the Arab Spring. And I've just never read anything about LGBTQ plus communities in the Middle East. So yeah, these are all the books we got at Foyles. And then we went on to Forbidden Planet, a bookstore that is famous for having science fiction and graphic novels and mangas. And Daniel picked out The City and the City by Shaina Mievo. And from what I understand, this is sci-fi meets thriller, and that's all I really know about it. And then I chose Orange by Ichigo Takano. And this is a manga. And this is basically all the things I usually wouldn't read. Like, I don't read a lot of sci-fi, I don't read a lot of romance, and I've never in my life have read... No, that's not true, I've read one manga before. But I don't read a lot of manga either. But I would like to check this one out. I've seen Matthew Schurapper praise it highly on his channel, and I will link his channel down below. But yeah, this is a manga that is a sci-fi romance. So all the things I usually don't read, but I'm hoping I will really enjoy this. There's a second volume to this, so if I really enjoy this, I will get the second one. And those were all the books we got at Forbidden Planet. And we then moved on to the London Review Bookshop, where we got a lovely bookmark to go with our purchase. And we picked up two classics. One is North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell, and the other one is The Warden by Anthony Trollope. And Katie from Books and Things said that North and South is pretty much Pride and Prejudice plus industrialization, and that just sounds fascinating to me. And I heard of The Warden, it's the first part in the Barsetshire Chronicles. I heard the first part is not the best, but that it gets better with the second, and I'm just curious to get into Anthony Trollope. On that first day in London, we picked up two more books. One was at an Oxfam, and that's William Hazlitt on The Pleasure of Hating. I'm gonna read the subtitle as well because it's just so funny. Love turns with a little indulgence to indifference or disgust. Hatred alone is immortal. Now, doesn't that sound just fabulous and super mean? These again are essays. William Hazlitt was very famous for his essays, and I just spotted it and picked it up for Daniel. And then the last bookstore we went to that day was Bookmarks, which is a socialist bookshop that I think Jean from Bookish Thoughts really loves. And we ended up picking up The Islamophobia Industry, How the Right Manufactures Hatred of Muslims by Nathan Lean. And this sounded really interesting. It basically takes a look at, well, it's kind of what the title says. It looks at how Islamophobia comes about, how it is being purposefully increased and used by the right and to manipulate people, and just to find out those underlying structures. And I think this will be really interesting and helpful in talking to people who are Islamophobic or who are, I don't know, scared somehow or have irrational fears. And as much as I hate seeing that in people, I think it's important that you don't just either tell them to, you know, fuck off, or just tell them they're stupid, but rather to have solid arguments when you talk to them, and to not just go with empathy, because sometimes this is unfortunately not working, but to show them what structures are creating their opinions, and to maybe, you know, change their minds about things in a polite and rational manner. And I think it's really important to keep a dialogue going. And so, yes, I think this book hopefully will help with that. And that was our first day in London. And on the second day we met up with a friend and we went book shopping together. She lives near Birmingham and works in Norwich, but she managed to come up for a day, which was wonderful. The two bookstores we went to together were Persephone's, and we picked up two books there for us. One was The Victorian Chaise Longue by Margarita Lasky, and if you read Persephone books, or if you own any, you know that they don't really give you a summary of the story, so you kind of have to go with your guts. They have quotes in the books, and you kind of have to go with your gut whether you like the book or not. And so for this one I'm actually going to read out part of the quote. "And in the instance before she had perceived what she was touching, she was flooded with that same memory that had stirred in her when she first saw the chaise longue in the shop of Marylebone's High Street. Only now it was deeper, truer, and intolerably painful. A memory of passionate love, of a body that crushed and broke into hers, pressed down on the Victorian chaise longue." It just intrigued me, so it sounds like a really interesting story, and I'm hoping I will like it. And with Persephone books, we all know what we're here for. It's the end papers, so I'll show you these as well. They always have these beautiful end papers. And what I realized, this one actually has two different ones. So the back one is also a rose pattern, but quite different. And the other Persephone book we picked up was It's Hard to Be Hip Over 30. And we're both turning 30 this year, so we just sort of, it was kind of funny to get this book. And it's a collection of poetry by Judith Viorst, and I hadn't heard of her before. But the poems seem to be sort of fun and ironic, and they just sound really good, and we like that. And there you go, these are the end papers, so quite beautiful as well. And then we went to Gaze the Word, another wonderful bookstore, and we ended up getting quite a few books there as well. One is a graphic non-fiction novel, and that is Queer, A Graphic History by Mac John Barker and Julia Skeel. And then we picked up James Baldwin, Giovanni's Room. So this is one of the queer classics, I would say. The other one we picked up is by Christopher Isherwood, and this is Christopher and His Kind. And this is, from what I understand, autobiographical. And it's about the time that Christopher Isherwood sort of packed his bags and left for Europe, and he fell in love with a German man, Heinz. And the time that it is set in is during the rise of the Nazi regime, and so it's also about Christopher trying to protect Heinz from the Nazis. And the last one we picked up is Boy Erased by Gerard Conley. It's a memoir of identity, faith and family, and he grew up a Baptist Christian, and his father is actually, or is, a Baptist pastor. And when he came out, that was very difficult for him, and he was actually sent by his family to a conversion camp and underwent conversion therapy, but he couldn't go through with it, and in the end remained true to himself, and this is the story of his journey. And it just sounds incredible, and it's so heartbreaking that conversion therapy today is still a thing, and that people still believe that your sexuality is a choice, which is just, I'm sorry, but it's just ridiculous. And yeah, those were all the books we picked up on our second day in London. And finishing off the second day, I just realized I forgot our biggest purchase in London, and that was on the first day. And that was at Fob, and they usually have book deals where you get 2 books for £5. We picked up a lot of great books, I think. One is Ford Madox Ford, The Good Soldier. And Ford Madox Ford actually took a stroll together with Ezra Pound in Gießen, which is close to where I live, and it's the town I studied in. And I've never read anything by him, and so this will be my first Ford Madox Ford. We also picked up The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea by Yukio Mishima. And this is a Japanese modern classic, I would say. It's about a group of young boys, 13-year-olds, who admire this sailor greatly, and at some point they realize, oh, he's just as soft as everybody else, and the repercussions from that are apparently quite intense. And then we also picked up William Faulkner, Absalom, Absalom. Now, I have never read any Faulkner, but I want to, hopefully this year if I get around to it. We do own The Sound and the Fury and As I Lay Dying. Daniel read As I Lay Dying last year and loved it, and that was his first Faulkner. And somebody tell me if that's a good place to start, or if you would suggest rather The Sound and the Fury or Absalom, Absalom. Then we also picked up a crime fiction classic, and that is The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler. And this is one of the books with Philip Marlowe at the center, the private investigator. And then I spotted it and I had to show it to Daniel because I know he would want to get it. Even though we have another book by this author that we both haven't read yet. And it's Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon. Now, of course, this is a really important book of postmodernism. At some point I do want to read it, although it's quite intimidating and I think super weird and probably not the easiest read. We do own The Crying of Lot 49, so somebody tell me which of these two books would be a better start to Thomas Pynchon's work. We also picked up a book by Charles Bukowski, and this is On Cats, and it's not a book Bukowski wrote specifically from what I gather, but rather a collection of different pieces and bits from his texts and his poetry, everything that focused on cats. And it also includes, let me see if I can find a page, pictures of, I think, the cats Bukowski had during his lifetime. And I've never read any poetry by Bukowski, and there's quite a bit in here, so I really like that. I have read The Post Office and Ham on Rye, and I love both of them. And then I picked out 3 books by an author that I think I want to read all of her books eventually. And that is Angela Carter. And I have read The Night Circus, which I absolutely loved. And I've also read her short story collection, The Bloody Chamber. And actually I've read another one by her, and that is Black Venus. It's another short story collection last year, and really enjoyed that one as well. And so the books by Angela Carter we picked up are Heroes and Villains. And this is a novel about Marianne, and she lives in a white tower, I think protected by her father and professors, and it's sort of a dystopian post-apocalyptic future, and outside of the tower is where the barbarians live. But Marianne ends up leaving the tower and has sort of all these new dark experiences, and that's all I know, but it sounds intriguing. And then we also got The Infernal Desire Machines of Dr. Hoffmann, and this is based on a German classic, The Sandman by E.T.A. Hoffmann, and it's about Desiderio and Albertina. And Desiderio falls for Albertina, and she's the daughter of Dr. Hoffmann. Dr. Hoffmann creates the city, and I have to read this, one ridden with madness, crime and sexual excess. So sounds quite the page-turner. Then the last one by Angela Carter we picked up is Wise Children, and this seems to be sort of based on or inspired by Shakespeare, and particularly Shakespeare's use of twins. This is also about twins and the show business, and that's all I know. Then the other ones we picked up are Call Me By Your Name by Andrea Asseman. I will talk a little bit more about it in my January wrap-up because I already read it. We also picked up Allie Smith, How to Be Both, and she might be another author I would want to read everything by, but I've read too little by her to know. I've read Boy Meets Girl and I loved that. We also own Autumn, but I haven't read it. And this somehow plays in the 1460s and in the 1960s, and is two tales of love intertwined, so that will be interesting. We also picked up Kevin Kwan, Crazy Rich Asians, and I've seen this on quite a few channels. I think Wincy from Wincy Reads really likes the series, from what I can tell. And it's also been turned into a movie. I haven't watched it, I've seen the trailer, and I love the trailer. I usually don't read romance, but I don't know, I like the idea of the story. It sounds crazy and over the top. And I started it, and so far I'm enjoying it. And then the last one we picked up at FOB was Welcome to Lagos by Chibundo Onuzo. And this is the story of 5 Nigerians traveling to the capital Lagos, and I think trying to make a better life there. And they're very different, the characters, but somehow something ends up connecting them, and I think it's something quite tragic. And then finally, on to the third day we spent in London. We ended up going to 2 bookshops that day. There was only one planned, but then it was raining all day, and well, we had to sort of flee at some point to a bookshop to get dry. But the first one was planned, and that is Word on the Water, and it's a bookstore that is in a boat on the water on a it's not on the Thames, but it's like on one of the smaller rivers going through London, and that was really fun. And of course we had to, as we were on a boat, pick up Jerome K. Jerome, 3 men in a boat, and also 3 men on the Bummel. And then I also spotted and had to take it with me, Sanditon and Other Stories by Jane Austen. This is sort of her juvenilia and sort of her one of her unfinished novels and shorter works. Then Daniel spotted The Pickwick Papers by Charles Dickens and really wanted to take this home. Pickwick Papers is actually his debut novel, or was his debut novel, at the age of just 24. He wrote this huge massive book, so what am I doing with my life? And it was published in 1836. And then another one that Daniel spotted and wanted to take home was Mr. Vertigo by Paul Auster. Daniel's a huge Paul Auster fan. I've only read the New York trilogy but really enjoyed it, so I was on board with this. Finally, I spotted Andrea Levy's Small Island. It's the story of Queenie Bly, for once, who is taking in Jamaican lodgers, and at that time that the novel is set, and I think it's like late 40s and going onward, people didn't want to see that in London and weren't really appreciative of that. And at the same time it still tells the story of what I assume are the 2 lodgers, and that's Gilbert and Hortense Joseph. And Gilbert Joseph was fighting for England actually in World War II against the Nazis, but now that he's come back to London, it's quite a different experience of how he's being treated. And so I think it's just telling the story of these characters and how they struggle in a society that, well, still today has not overcome racism and still has those ideas of the empire. And yes, from Word on the Water, like I said, we went into the city again, and then we got into some heavy rain and we ended up going into Waterstones and just picked up a few more classics to, yeah, close some holes in our collection and have some of the authors that we haven't gotten any books by so far and that we do want to read. Another one is The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. And this is also Victorian literature and seems to be like, I think it's a mystery novel, and it's also on the back is described as a sensation novel. And then we also picked up Lady Audley's Secret by Mary Elizabeth Braddon, and this is another Victorian classic that we haven't read yet, and I think this is also sort of on the scandalous side. And then we picked up Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. And this is about a governess who joins a family and ends up in a rather bad situation because she's not happy and the kids are cruel, and it's to the point where she becomes invisible. So yes, those were all the books we got in London. I know, huge pile. And you would think that is a point where you stop, but we did not quite, or I did not, I should say. Daniel was innocent of the next step because he went back to Germany because he still had to work before Christmas, whereas I went to Bristol to visit one of my sisters who lives there. And one of those days she was off from work and her kids were in school and kindergarten, and so we did some Christmas shopping, and she was kind enough to take me to 2 bookstores in Bristol. And of course that did end up with me getting some more books, but we're getting towards the end now, so I just wanted to show you these as well. So the first shop we went to was sort of like Fob. It was similar in that they had music and I think films as well, and also were selling books, and they also had this 2 for £5 deal. And I spotted Isaac Asimov, I, Robot, which is a sci-fi classic. And I had to pick it up, and I didn't realize before, and I always thought this was a novel, but it's actually a collection of stories, so that's really interesting. And the books that come after it are actually novels, but this one isn't. And then my sister also picked up 2 books, and I didn't know if I wanted to get a second book, but then I saw what she picked up and it sounded so interesting. So I ended up doing the 2 for £5 bargain, and I picked Kurt Vonnegut's Mother Night, and this is about Howard W. Campbell Jr. and he's on trial for Israeli war crimes, but he's also been a propagandist under the Nazi regime, and that was before he became a spy for the US. And he's done all these shady things, and the novel sort of asks the question, is he guilty, and can you just think black and white in a world that is full of different shades of grey? I've only read Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut so far, but I'm interested definitely in picking more of his books up, and this just sounded fascinating. And then the other store we went to was another Oxfam, and so I got some really nice books there for cheap, so that was fun. And one was Finn Family Moomin Troll by Tove Jansson, and I loved the Moomins when I was younger, but I only ever saw the cartoon version, and this will be my first book by Tove Jansson. And then I ended up picking up a copy of The History of Love by Nicole Krauss, and I have read this book years ago, and I absolutely loved it, but I don't remember a lot of the story. And this is, I think, two interconnected stories, and one is Alma Singer, and she wants to see her mother happy again, and is trying to track down the author of this book her mother is translating lovingly. And then the other is the story of Leo Gursky, who I think is the author of the book, and he lost the love of his life back in Poland decades ago. And it's how these stories intertwine, and I just remember loving this, and I do want to reread this at some point. And then I also found, really cheap, The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins, and I was like, well, those are the Woman in White and The Moonstone are the most famous ones by Wilkie Collins, so why not get both of them and take a leap of faith and hope that I will like them. This is another sort of mystery novel of the Victorian age. And then the last book I picked up at Oxfam is Here Comes the Sun by Nicholas Dennis Benn. And this is set in Jamaica, and it's a story of Margaret, who is trying to get her younger sister Thandi through school and supports her financially. And she had to use her sexuality in ways she did not want to survive, and she does not want the same to happen to her sister. And then what happens is that there's a company is trying to build a new hotel where they live, and it actually threatens their hopes for the future. So this is the last one I picked up. You would think we'd be finished by now, but we aren't. There's 2 more books, and I promise that's the end of it. And those are gifts that I received, and one was by my sister, and that was still for my birthday, but we didn't get to see each other for that, so she gave it to me when I came. And that is The Road Beneath My Feet by Frank Turner. And Frank Turner is absolutely my favorite musician. I've been to quite a few of his concerts. I absolutely love his music. And this is about his first, I think, 1,000 tours? Yeah, his first 1,000 shows. And it's about his time on the road, traveling and doing concerts. And I just want to read this. The other one I got from Daniel for Christmas, and that is Somebody I Used to Know by Wendy Mitchell. And I mentioned that I'm interested in dementia and literature, and this book deals with that. Wendy Mitchell herself was diagnosed with dementia at the early age of 58, and this is her memoir as she's going through dealing with her dementia and losing control over her life. I think this is going to be heartbreaking, but it's so important, it's so difficult to get stories on dementia and Alzheimer's from the point of view of the people suffering from the disease, because obviously at some point they can no longer chronicle what happens to them. So yeah, this book will show up again sometime in the future. I'm hoping to get that series I want to do on books on dementia started in February. And I won't start with this, I will start with books I've read before and go back to those. But eventually this one's going to show up as well. So if you made it all the way through to the end, thank you and wow. And as I said, there's not going to be another huge haul like this, because we have so many books that we haven't read and it's just not necessary. But we wanted to do this in London, and we wanted to splurge, and we wanted to have these books, and that was sort of our present to ourselves. And I do realize not everybody can do that, and that we're very fortunate we're able to do that. And I wanted to show you these books because I'm still a new channel, and I feel we're still getting to know each other. And I think this is a quick overview of some of the interests in literature that I have and the things I like to read or that I would like to read in the future. And yeah, so this is where I ended up doing this video, and I hope you liked it anyway, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to subscribe to this channel if you want to. Leave a comment down below on any of the books that you have read and enjoyed or hated. I don't care either way, I just want to hear your opinions. And yeah, if you want to like this video, and I think that's all I have. So thanks and bye guys!